Kia ora and welcome to this next video about our stories about Alexander the Great. So in the previous one, the first Prelude video, we went through the Persian Wars and the fact that although the Greeks won, they vowed revenge on the Persians for those reasons you can see on the screen. So in the collective Greek mind was this desire to one day invade Persia. But who would be the leader? Who would lead the Greek states in an invasion of Persia? Because the Greeks were infamous for continuously fighting each other rather than uniting under one leader. So this leads us to where we go now, the rise of Macedonia. If we think back, we think that the golden age of Athens. After the victory over the Persians in the Persian War, we had the golden age of Athens. Athens rose to its preeminent status as the most powerful, the richest, and the most influential state in the Eastern Mediterranean. This was the time of philosophy, of wonderful building, of ideas, of creations, and so forth, and the highlight of democracy, obviously. Now, this all ended with the Peloponnesian War, when the Athenians fought the Spartans. The Spartans were really concerned about the Athenian strength, so they actually invaded Athens, and the Spartans were victorious, and that was the end of the golden age of Athens, as Athens plummeted from its previous heights. So we have the state of constant conflict in Greece. You can see the main city-states mentioned there. All these gritty city-states continuously fighting each other. Alliances would wane and wax as, one year your Thebes is allied with Corinth against Argos, and then the next year Thebes is fighting Corinth with the support of Athens. And it went on and on like this for quite some time. And so we have a power vacuum. There's not one all-powerful state, and that's when those rough northerners in Macedonia begin to flex their muscles. Under Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander. Now, he became king at 21 with the death of his brother. His brother actually had a son who was more, shall we say, eligible for the throne, but this son, Philip's nephew, died in mysterious circumstances, and so Philip took the throne and inherited a state that was in turmoil. Macedonia was unstable and unsafe. There were enemies on all sides, and there was very little cohesion within Macedonia itself. As a young man, though, Philip had been a hostage and had spent time in the city of Thebes, and there he had seen the efficient Theban military machine. And he took these lessons back with him when he became king. He could now implement them. So the first thing he did was execute his two half-brothers, so they would not lay claim to the throne. And then he set about securing the safety of his kingdom with a range of ideas around diplomacy, alliances, bribes, and gifts. Philip would talk and he would arrange alliances, particularly himself. He married 7 times, but any sort of eligible female in Philip's extended family was up for grabs, essentially, for Philip to use to marry to the princes and kings of other kingdoms, thus to secure an alliance and thus to keep Macedonia safe. Now, although the Macedonians were uncivilized and the state was unstable, it was quite rich, particularly gold and mainly the silver mines provided Philip with a lot of income that he could spend on bribes and gifts with various states. All this was Philip's master plan to buy time. So he brought the safety of Macedonia with the resources at his disposal, marriages in particular, and using the wealth from the mines. And this gave him time to rebuild his army. And Philip, he trained a highly efficient, highly disciplined army based on his ideas he learned in Thebes, and he introduced the weapon that you can see the soldiers holding here, known as the sarissa, a 5-meter-long spear. It had to be wielded by 2 hands, but the advantage is that when the rest of the Greeks are fighting with just under 2-meter-long spears, a 5-meter one keeps the enemy quite far away from you. Now, it was wielded with 2 hands, and Philip created what we call the phalanx, which is the formation you see here, where he would have large numbers of his soldiers wielding sarissas, and they would fight in this porcupine formation, and they would cut swathes through the enemy defences. Now, the rest of the Greeks had never seen anything like this before, and the arrival of Philip's sarissa armed phalanx onto the battlefield caused many a knee to shudder. And what this meant was that Philip could now extend Macedonian influence. He didn't have to spend all his time bribing states. He could use his army. So he just sent about conquering cities. all to keep Macedonia safe and to increase Macedonia's influence. He still kept up the marriages and the alliances, but he had an army that was the best of any. And he was able to then see Macedonia rise in power and influence, which seriously concerned Athens. And there is a politician in Athens by the name of Demosthenes, who right from the start wrote many, many speeches against Philip. He called them the Philippics, against Philip and urging the Athenians to attack Philip and invade Macedonia. But we have a state of constant warfare because there's poverty all over Greece. And the desire for wealth, well, once a king actually gets wealth, then he can use it to reward his citizens. And so kings are not going to lie down when there's a chance to accrue lots of wealth. But Philip is now flexing his muscles with his army, with his wealth, and he's setting out to dominate all of Greece. And that's essentially what happens, because Philip has got his eye on invading Persia. That's the goal. That's the big plan. That will show him in the eyes of the Greeks that he is their savior, that he is the one to lead the revenge invasion, and it will also bring untold wealth to Greece itself. There's no doubt amongst the Greek mind that they will beat the Persians because the Persians are weak and unmanly, particularly because the soldiers wore trousers, which was incredibly unmanly in the ancient world. Attacking Persia, inevitably winning, and seizing the wealth and the slaves that would accrue from that means that the Greek city-states will no longer fight each other. Well, that's the idea. It's unlikely to be true. Isocrates, an Athenian, he wrote to Philip and he said, work for the good of the Hellenes are the Greeks. Extend your power of as many barbarians as possible. So Philip is the favored leader to take an all-Greek invasion of Persia. But first, he needs to solidify himself as the most powerful king in all of Greece, and he does this in 338 BC at the Battle of Chaeronea. This really shows the power of Macedon. Persia's the goal, but Philip wants to lead what we call a pan-Hellenic invasion, which means all of Greece, pan, all Hellenic Greece. And he's going to do that, but first he must show that he is the undisputed most powerful king in all of Greece. And so the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip and Macedonian army fight in a Greek alliance led by Thebes. And they are destroyed. The enemy destroyed by the Macedonian phalanx with the Saracens. And Alexander is on the left wing, and the story is that he led the cavalry charge that totally destroyed the elite Theban sacred band, which was the elite fighting force of the day until they met Alexander and Philip and the Saracens. The Theban sacred band, they had destroyed the Spartans. They had reduced the Spartans to, I guess, a massive fall from where they previously had been. And the Theban sacred band fell to Alexander. And they're interesting, or perhaps unusual, because they were 300 strong and made up of 150 pairs of male lovers. The idea being that each lover would fight to defend his lover and would also not fight in a shameful way in front of his lover. Whatever, it didn't work. Alexander and his cavalry defeated them. Now Macedon is the undisputed power in all of Greece. But Philip was so impressed by the bravery of the sacred band, because they all died to a man, all of them, and they all died of the wounds to their front, that he buried them with full honours. And this is the gravesite there. And Philip erected the stone lion on their gravesite. It was destroyed during the years, but bits and pieces were found that was put together. And there we have the stone lion stands over the grave of the sacred band. To give you an idea of scale, a 6-foot human would only come up to about halfway up that plinth. But that's where those brave sacred band of Thebes lie. Well, the impact of the victory at Chaeronea. Philip is awarded the title hegemon, which means essentially the best and the biggest. He's not the king of Greece, he's the most powerful king in all of Greece. And part of the title means that the rest of the Greeks are to respect the king, Philip, and his descendants, because Philip's playing a long game here. So this is not just about Philip, it's about Macedonia, because any king of Macedonia will inherit the title of hegemon and must be thus respected by the rest of the Greeks. The treaty was signed at Corinth, and we call it the League of Corinth in 337 BC. All of the Greek city-states signed except Sparta. The Spartans refused, and it's a sign of their relative weakness now that Philip was not particularly bothered, and the Spartans can go back to being Sparta down the bottom of the peninsula there. They're not going to be a major threat. So nearly all of the Greek states sign, and what this does is Philip is finally, he is the king who has united all of the Greek states, because it's a master stroke. It's very, very simple. But all the signatories to the League of Corinth, if one state was to decide to invade another state, all the other states would invade the aggressor, which meant that no one is going to invade another state. And this kept them all under control, under Philip's thumb. The Greeks were free, they could carry on as they liked, as long as they obey Philip and abide by the League of Corinth. Philip now completely dominates Greece, and Macedonia is the undisputed hugest power in all of Greece. So the invasion of Persia is now the plan, and in 336 Philip sends 10,000 warriors to establish a beachhead on Persian territory. Which now we'll take back a little bit and we'll go back to Alexander's birth and his parentage. So if we look at Philip, he's forever known as the father of Alexander. In his own right, he was an incredibly impressive individual. He had 7 wives. Olympias, Alexander's mother, was the 6th, and many lovers, both male and female. 2 sons, Aridaeus to his 4th wife, and then Alexander to Olympias. Aridaeus was reputably a half-wit and wasn't seen as any sort of viable contender for the throne when Philip died. Philip was a hard drinker. He was a tough man. He was a man's man, a soldier's man. He was a king, he was a soldier, he was a warrior. He was quite the impressive individual by any imagination. And he died at the peak of his powers. He was assassinated at 46, just on the eve, really, of his invasion of Persia. Now, Delphi is really important in understanding Philip. You can see here's Delphi itself. This is the town, and here is the sacred site, and the temple to Apollo is there. Philip had actually fought what was known as the Sacred War on behalf of Delphi, because some states, I think it was Argos, had invaded Delphi and stolen treasures, and Philip fought essentially to protect Delphi, which gave him, I guess, the credit of being, almost blessed by Apollo for doing that. It was opportunism at its best, but it did give Philip sort of a right at Delphi, which meant that any messenger from Macedonia could join the line first, because they are from Philip's kingdom. So Philip sort of had that connection to Delphi, which is quite important that we understand him. Now, Macedonia itself is a really interesting part of Greece. I've travelled through most of Greece, and Macedonia is different to the rest of Greece. It's very mountainous. As you can see, I just took this from the bus, the motorway into Macedonia. You can see the forbidding mountains at the end there. And here we are crossing, it's not the border, well, I suppose it is the border. You're still in Greece, but you are going to Macedonia, and there's a Macedonian sunburst on the flag there. The houses, this is what Macedonia is like at the moment. There's obviously modern houses. It gives an idea of what the town's like. Many of the houses are built of stone, which is prolific in that area. And this has taken us deeper into Vergina, where the royal burial grounds were, where the palace of Philip was actually established. Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is in Macedonia. Mount Olympus is obviously where the Olympian gods reside, and there's the top of Mount Olympus where you got about halfway up, I think, and there's a couple of ex-Waitakere college students up at the plinth, which is as far as you can go without getting your mountain gear on. And here's the Waitakere kids halfway up Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. And here, this is actually the tomb of Philip. I'm really, really interested in Philip. He's the father of Alexander, but this tomb of Philip was discovered in 1974. Now, Philip was buried under this artificial hill here, and the tomb is still there, and the museum itself is inside the tomb. We'll go in there and have a look at the artifacts of Philip's tomb, and as you can see here, this is walking into the hill itself and into Philip's tomb and into the museum. But we'll do that in the next video, so look out for that. Okay, ka kite.